All right, welcome everybody to the Konflux Community Architecture Call. Just a reminder that we have a code of conduct, and participating in this meeting means that you are agreeing to follow that code of conduct as well. We have a couple of topics on the agenda today. The first one, there was several folks from Konflux that went to Open Source Summit and the Open SSF Community Day North America in Denver, which was 2 weeks ago now. We wrote up a trip report that we shared internally at Red Hat, but I don't know if that's necessarily a trip report that we can share with the community, but we can at least provide some feedback that we got, or some of our experience. So I'll say, maybe I'll say a couple of things. Ralph, you can say a couple of things. I think that we're the only people on this call right now. But I thought it was a pretty good trip. We had, what was it? 5 talks related to Konflux, at least one every day. So we talked about Hermeto, we talked about Konflux from balancing usability and security. We talked about what you can do with like a detailed provenance, and how different types of provenance compare against each other. We talked about how to look at the whole vulnerability lifecycle process within Konflux, and then we also talked about the community contribution model, how the trust model within Konflux allows community contribution, developer experimentation, and whatnot. We also had some good hallway conversations. There are some topics that I think we're trying to solicit with other folks within the Konflux team, with those on the various teams, like one that impacts potentially the integration service, and the Conforma evaluation as well, is around how we can potentially establish trust in attestations. So this is relevant potentially for our desire to generate summary attestations for policy evaluation, as well as how we can evaluate or establish, or how we can use attestations within conform policies for tests that are run in integration test scenarios, instead of depending upon that salsa provenance of the integration test scenario directly. And just briefly, our trust model is kind of baked around establishing trust from the provenance. We do that for our built artifacts. We use the provenance and we say this artifact, it is produced by tasks which we trust. It has known inputs and it has the specific output. We can certainly extend that same model for these other types of attestations, like the summary attestations or test or vulnerability attestations. If we have a task that emits that attestation or produces this attestation, then we can generate provenance for that attestation as well. These attestations are artifacts, and so we can establish trust in those artifacts, in those attestation artifacts, based on the provenance of those. So I think that we have further conversations to or there are further conversations that we need to have with various folks, and I imagine we'll come back to this call after we've had some of those. But if you want to be involved in those, then feel free to reach out, and we can loop you in as well. But Ralph, did you have anything else you wanted to bring up?
Just a summary thought or feeling that I felt very much at home in the OpenSSF Community Day in a way that I was surprised of. I didn't expect to feel that connected to kind of what everybody else was talking about and thinking about. The like exciting talks that were happening were about like how to generate signatures in provenance for AI models and tools for managing SBOMs, and how what can you do for policy engines to work on SLSA provenance, which is like everything that we do end to end. So people were really interested in what we had to say and what we were working on. We were not the only we were not the only people working on those kinds of things. So it was great to like going and attending in person and meeting the people and seeing their faces, like melted a wall for me that like didn't need to be there in the first place, realizing that we can talk about what we're doing easily, right, without it having to like thinking, oh, it's this esoteric or Byzantine supply chain security thing. There's definitely a community of people thinking and talking about how to do that and mature that for the industry at large, which is super, super cool.
And like related to that as well, I forgot to mention that in talking with, all of the steering committee members for Salsa were there at the conference. And so we actually had our first, I think it was the first in-person meeting for all of the steering committee members. We just had a new election this spring. But in talking with Tom Hennon, Tom and I we're going to post a request for examples for end-to-end Salsa. And I'm definitely planning to submit some end-to-end example using Konflux as how to Salsa. So just additional example of like how it feels like what we are doing here is definitely in line with everything else. I think it's pretty cool that we have this ability to show off what we're doing or to use what we're doing to say, hey, it's possible to meet these goals.
Andrew, maybe as the meeting goes on, I'll put links in the agenda, copying to some of the talks that we gave. We've got recordings of them posted, and so we can have them in the community Arch Call agenda, just so people can find them post facto here.
Yeah, and if you look right now, the talks for Open Source Summit should be posted, but we're still waiting for the OpenSSF Community Day talks to be posted.
Yeah.
But did anybody have any questions about that? Yeah, Louis.
Was there any interest or around Konflux from other folks?
There was actually some interest. There was an organization that was their primary in-house tools that they used were GitHub Actions and Argo Workflows. But as they were leaving the conference, they came up to me and said that they might start looking into Tekton. So it felt really cool to have this experience where, I mean, we're lucky enough to have so many talks accepted, and so I think that helped us to relay the type of work that we're doing, especially since every talk was 20 minutes except for one of them. So we couldn't get into much detail with any individual talk, but across the set of them, I think we covered a pretty big swath. So at the end, them realizing that maybe there is something in it, it's might be helpful. And then we're also trying to talk with some other organizations about Hermeto and are we like we're solving some more problems. Is there some way that we can reuse tools already present instead of re-implementing them? Maybe we can try and get some more contributors to Hermeto. Yeah,
I think maybe an impression I had. Well, first, just a story that when Adam gave his talk on Hermeto on Monday, there were two guys sitting next to me, and when Adam's talk was over, they leaned next to each other and they whispered, "That was awesome," and that like gave me the clue on Monday that like we were in the right place. But a bunch that almost all the talks I went to were CDCon talks, and everybody who was attending those were people who were like really invested in CI/CD pipelines, and the topics were all around security. So they were all people who were already thinking about those kinds of things. So they weren't people who were just like shopping for a drop-in solution, to solve. They've already spent years thinking about it to the point where they're like attending an OpenSSF community day to think about how they can improve tools all around. So there was a lot of interest. Like I spent a lot of time in the hallway, just one-on-one explaining Konflux and how it worked, because people wanted to know, and they'd ask questions about why is it separated this way and how does this work and so on. But it wasn't like people were ready to go and adopt it. I definitely felt we've talked in the past about, to what degree do we want to be an integrated solution where everything works together and you have this really nice user experience on top of that? And to what degree do we want to be a composable set of services that you could pick and choose pieces of to run? And I definitely felt the pull towards that second pole at the conference, where people thought maybe a certain section was cool. How do I do that in combination with this other thing? But, I couldn't fault them for that based on where it seemed like they were coming from.
All right. We have 3 other topics, so I'll go ahead and move to the next one. If at the end people have additional questions, we can loop back. There's a topic on here about ADR review. I don't know who it's from. It's Ralph.
I added it just to say I'm not sure that we need discussion, but we talked about them a couple of weeks ago, and I have felt that like our ADR discussions can tend to languish in the pull request queue. So I'm just adding it here as kind of a metronome to check back in. Is anything here stuck that we need to talk about? And maybe not. Andrew, could you click through like 40, 48 first, and then 47 and 49, and just check to see if we need to discuss anything? If not, maybe we can move on quickly. Ryan, and then I see Brian after that.
I was going to say, Andrew, I just had a quick question for you in this thread, but that's the only thing.
I'm blocking it. All right.
Cool. We don't need to resolve that now. Just thank you for checking on it. Brian, I see you've got a hand up.
Could be a topic for another time, but since you brought up ADRs, I've noticed in the past that there's been confusion about what kinds of changes need ADRs and which ones don't.
Sounds like we need an ADR for that.
Yeah, right.
I'm joking, but I'm actually serious. Like to clarify why you would need to do an ADR. I can take action to write that. Unless anybody else wants to do it, feel free to grab it. Just let me know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was if I was thinking off the cuff, I think that not every little change needs an ADR for sure. Anything that's going to span systems, or like it's going to change like an assumption about the way the system works, I think that needs an ADR. And especially if there's some decision that we want to make, even if it's a small one, but if you can if you can guess that in the future it might not be clear why we made that decision, that's a great case for an ADR. The biggest thing about it is documenting the why for a decision, so that in the future all of our successors can know which decisions they can overturn because they know why we made them at the time in the past. That's the biggest thing.
Like, I think it would be better if we had more ADRs than less, but only if we are efficient at processing them, because we don't want that layer of work to like slow people down.
I agree. Yeah, and that's again part of why I added it to the agenda here, which we've only done this twice before in architecture calls, which seems like if we were doing anything, maybe we should be processing our ADR queue. But yeah, we'll see. I see Louis and then Ryan.
Yeah, I think there are different reasons for creating an ADR. I think one of the reasons that it makes it valuable is codifying a certain pattern that we use across the board and explaining why we do that, and maybe more information about it. What I don't think an ADR is good for is for driving work. So if we have an idea and we say, oh, we want to do this, let's create an ADR, and then we're going to have a bunch of issues to implement it. I think that's when you see ADRs just becoming stale because it's not a prioritization tool, right? So I think if we see that pattern happening, I think we should really take a step back and say, you know what, we're not going to do an ADR now. We're going to experiment. We're going to have a couple of options there, play with it. And then once a certain pattern emerges and we have high confidence that it is useful, then we can turn that into an ADR so we don't have to explore things from scratch again, right? We have a place to start. But I just wanted us to be cautious about using ADR to drive prioritization of work.
Thanks for that, Louis. Ryan?
This kind of follows Louis' point, actually. I think prioritization of work should follow ADRs. I'll use ADR 48 as an example. That was kind of an afterthought while I was working on the feature refinement for Konflux 3812, and we were dealing with the actual architectural changes as a part of Konflux 3812. But of course, feature refinement docs aren't public. So if we want to be an upstream first project, I think it's important that we make sure that architectural decisions are made in the ADR before we do downstream work like feature refinement documents. And frankly, I think if we order things in that way, things won't sit around for as long. Like ADR 48 has been able to sit around because from a program perspective, it's all planned out. We can do the work. So it's kind of this afterthought, whereas if it becomes a prerequisite for doing the work, it's easier to prioritize it and push to get it done.
Thanks, Ryan. And just to reiterate what I said in chat as well, we have had that feedback before that it's challenging that feature refinement's not in public. So I think that's something Gap we know about. I don't think we have a good solution for it right now.
What's holding us back?
We haven't done it yet. Pick the next
You know what I
feature.
mean? Like,
Yeah, pick the next feature that we wanna refine, and we should just invent a process around it as we go, and then we'll fix that process. I think it feels like such a big lift, you know. But
Is this
I
something
love.
Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say, I love using Google Docs for feature refinement, like hands down. I just can't think of a better way to do it. But there's absolutely nothing keeping us from making all of our feature refinement docs live in a folder that gives everyone on like the Konflux Google group at least view privileges or comment privileges.
I think that the biggest challenge that we might run into is how efficiently or how properly we're going to be able to separate Konflux upstream from Konflux internal. And that's the challenge that I see. But maybe that's a determination we can make on a refinement on a feature by feature basis, with clear headers saying this is external, shared externally. But thanks for that challenge, Brian.
I mean, maybe I'll take a stab at forking the template and adding some decorator to the header to make sure it's public, and taking a few of them and adding like a Google Drive folder with some permissions that get cascaded down to documents, and just see what other problems that run into.
Yeah. Going back to the ADRs really quick that I mentioned, 47, there's feedback both for Brock as well as for others that need to respond to. And I think that 49 is one that Adam just created. So
yeah, that's the new one around the summary attestation things that we were talking about earlier. Andrew, I linked the PR that you sent in Toto, and it as for now it's like alternative, just because it's just a thing that's proposed hasn't been accepted by In Toto yet, but I'll be honest, that sounds like a better fit. So, frankly, in terms of POCs, it might even make sense to go with something like this as like the experimental thing.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're not familiar with this, this is something else that came up in Tom's and my discussions or at Open Source Summit. It's basically proposing the creation of a new predicate, which has a very simplified spec. All you have are certain properties that are verified, the resource URI and time verified and verifier. Again, falling back to the provenance angle, if you need to have additional information about how that policy was, or the result was determined, generate provenance for that attestation. As it relates, or we had a conversation about this in the salsa call yesterday as well, because in this salsa spec in the RC salsa source track, we have a requirement that a verification summary attestation is generated. Tom had some feedback that diverges from the build track because it's only a recommendation to use the source or the provenance predicate. So we might relax that to say that it's recommended to use the VSA, but that also allows for the use of this simplified verification predicate as well. But I'll also then change the predicate to not trigger the deprecation of the VSA. So both of them would be valid predicates. But it sounds like, Adam, you were thinking something similar. So. All right. Does anybody else want to discuss further about the ADRs?
No, if I could just comment that like the guidelines for developing tasks is one that I think is languishing. It's like kind of stuck in, I'm not sure where it's going to go, but let's resolve the ones at the top first. And once those are cleared out, we can get down to figuring out what to do about that. Same with workspace deprecation, which has moved on. It feels like just a formality now to get the ADR recorded, but something's just going to be worked out to get it into a state everyone's happy with. Again, let's resolve the ones at the top before going on there. The contributions and maintainers can read role bindings is not really a new ADR. It's almost a trivial update reflecting a new fact about the RBAC rules. It just needs another approval to get it merged. So if anybody could take a look at that one, provide it, I'd appreciate it.
Another thing that I noticed actually looking at some of the ADRs is that the status is a hodgepodge. Some of them are proposed, even though they've been merged and presumably accepted, and there's no differentiation between accepted and implemented as well. So there's just not as much clarity on what the different states actually mean or what it means to have a merged ADR. Or we don't have ADRs that are merged and rejected, even though we have rejected some. Should we have merged those with just a different status? But Ralph, if you're going to take a ADR, if you're going to propose an ADR, maybe that's some of the criteria to include.
Clarifying status, sure.
Yeah. All right. So the next topic is for CC.
Yeah, the first question is I'm not sure if is this the right place to discuss about advisory things. So I'm not sure about that. I just realized it is public the community call, so I'm not sure if this is the place to discuss. Because I feel like the advisory we are starting the advisory on GitLab and I can see we have some like let's say internal like logic for the RHSA, RHPA, and also someone talk about text only stuff. So Another side is I can see the advisory is getting bigger and bigger. I mean the repo. So I'm not sure if our Konflux team is thinking about or thought about to use some DB solution to store the advisory. For example, from my point of view, the customized or maybe cut down version of ERA2 can play as the metadata store because they have almost the same thing as the advisory, just missing the product ID. So I'm not sure if that's kind of like a slide that need to can be considered. Yeah.
Just to make one comment, I think that it's fine to talk about advisories in this call because it's in the public. There's a logic for it in the public release catalog. But you do have to, we do have to just be aware that there might be some internal implementation details which would not be relevant for the call. Brian, did you want to respond?
Well, I wanted to point out there's a lot of similarities between our advisories Git repo we're using for specific Red Hat data and how OSV is storing what is essentially the same thing, advisory data. They have multiple schemes, but one scheme is absolutely using a Git repo, and some of them must be pretty big. In fact, I have thought several times that I would love to see us switch our Git repo over to using OSV's format so that we can streamline the work that we're doing for advisories and make it be contributing towards like compatibility with OSV feeds in addition to feeding our downstream systems that need advisory data.
Sorry. So, Brian, can you repeat again about the replacement solution? You thought about? I didn't get it. Sorry about that.
So there's an upstream standard that Google and a few others created for what is essentially advisory data. It's what we call advisory data. And it's called OSV, Open Source Vulnerabilities, I think it's stands for. Yeah. So if you go look at like OSV and there's a standardized schema for this advisory data that lives in a Git repo. It's not super different from ours, but it's like just different enough that we can't like immediately reuse our tasks for creating OSV data. So for example, I would love to produce OSV data for the Konflux artifacts themselves that we publish. Like, so we could say that we have an OSV repo that gets scooped up into that big data feed for like community users. But right now we would need like special tasks. If we could align our internal Git repo with the OSV standard, then we would probably have all the bits we needed to do it.
Oh, I think that's another level's design. Maybe it's not totally the same as what I'm thinking about. Yeah.
But I guess my original point was you were saying that our Git repo is getting really big, and like, are we going to need a database? And I don't have a concrete answer to that, but my hunch is no, because there are some pretty heavyweight users using OSV via Git repos. But if we did need one, there's also a schema for databases out there.
Brian, can you find a link to that? I'm searching around and I haven't found it yet.
For what?
For the OSV's data store in a Git repo.
Yes, I can, but I'm taking a walk, so I can add it to the notes later. But yes, for sure, there's a schema.
Okay.
There's a schema document out there. I've looked at it multiple times.
That's good. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Because I'm trying to design some like workflow stuff on the real side and had some like a similar situations for some like data getting bigger and bigger. I believe Rob know that. So I'm thinking about some archive mechanism for the long term. So that's why I thought about maybe the advisory, let's say the repo has a similar situation. For example, after 2 years, how we deal with the old, let's say, outdated data. So we have to, and also a backup, right?
Yep. I'll add some links to the doc later. Like, you know, an API is definitely covered in the spec, like, so we could build a compliant API. We could also look at sharding Git repos, but I'll just add the info to the doc and you can look at it, research.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Brian. I tagged you in the doc as a reminder.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that wants to that has feedback on this topic, or CC? Are there any questions which?
No, I think mostly my detailed questions will share through the Slack channels. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thanks. So the last topic on the agenda goes to Ralph.
I was just thinking about chairing. Thanks, Andrew, for chairing the meeting today. We don't have a structure for deciding who chairs. It's kind of whoever shows up and picks up the baton first when we start, which is fine. But it like creates some uncertainty in the lead up to the meeting about who's going to be, running it. I've seen other communities use an organized rotation so that there's some schedule coming up. We could, I guess I want to propose implementing that. If anybody wants to be added to the list of chairpersons to rotate through, we can certainly do that. But I guess, what do you think? Is that any opposition or other ideas about how to organize it, Andrew?
Would it be too much to expand the scope of this to send an automated announcement to the Google group with the current agenda topics as well? As a reminder,
meaning the responsibility of the upcoming chairperson would be to do that ahead of the meeting,
or if you have some process which picks out from rotation who the next chairperson is going to be, then you can also in that message that gets sent out, you can find the topics that are there, and as a reminder, like the day before, say, hey, we have the architecture call coming up. So-and-so is chairing it. These are the topics that are registered.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Brian, you had your hand up, but then I went down. You good?
Excellent. Sorry.
So, like, what's the purpose of sending out the agenda ahead of time? It's to prompt people to review it so you can be prepared for the meeting. It's to remind people that, oh, there's something they wanted to add, and so by seeing the agenda and seeing their points not on there, they can think to add it. I don't want to just generate like spam. Would that be helpful to people to see a notification over email about that?
I think my thoughts were more the latter, to remind people that there's a call coming up to add topics, but it also provides that recurring reminder, because sometimes we've discussed canceling the call, or we have canceled the call, but that hasn't happened in a public location as well. So it allows us to respond after that message to say, oh, there's nothing. Does anyone want to bring anything, or is this one for canceling?
Cool.
But if it's more, I mean, it is a different application than what you were originally proposing. I was just considering it from presumably we want to send some notification about who is chairing the next meeting, finding that backup if needed, and how can we better utilize that communication.
Yeah, like a really low tech way of doing this I saw in some other communities meeting notes is just to have a list of people, and then you copy and paste the upcoming dates to the top of the doc with the rotation. So there's not even a reminder being sent about who's going to be chairing. It would still be that in your proposal. It would still be that person's job to manually put together a reminder email and send it out.
Yeah, and I don't want Louis to unsubscribe, so we should consider that separately.
Yeah. Can I hear from anybody else on the call? Would anybody else prefer to have a notification come out over email ahead of the meeting?
I would probably not prefer it. I already have it in my calendar, but yeah. A Slack thread might make sense, though, if you want to decide who will lead it.
Brian.
Sorry, hardware mute. Like Kruno, I have a slight preference toward not getting an email notification. Since it's already in my calendar, I already look at the agenda. Unlike Kruno, I think a Slack notification is actually worse noise than an email. Because it's this immediate, like, hey, look at me now. It could be something important, so it distracts you from what you're looking at. Whereas an email, it's easy to not look at your email for a little bit. You get an email and you miss it.
Oh, I didn't mean Slack notification that pings everybody. I was more thinking about a thread like we sometimes do have in the Konflux developer channel where we discuss like, oh, are we going to have the meeting or not? And so.
I think the low tech option is probably the best action item to do it now. And then if that becomes a problem of people missing the turn or whatnot, then we can revisit.
Cool. Andrew, what do you think about has some low tech option for to know who the people are in terms of responsibility, running the meeting and helping coordinate a transition between topics, canceling the meeting if you see there's no topics coming up is that person's responsibility also. And then I guess can we say use your judgment based on what's on the agenda. If the agenda looks full, no need to send out an announcement. If the agenda is looking totally empty, then start a thread to decide if we need to cancel the meeting. And if it's somewhere in the middle, just use your judgment about whether you think we need to start a thread to process something ahead of the meeting. Is that cool?
I think it makes sense. I mean, I'm totally fine with everybody saying my idea is terrible. I don't think we even need to be that prescriptive about it. I think people are generally going to be pretty good at using their judgment. So a low tech option, deferring to people's judgment seems reasonable.
Yep, and ping Ryan every time. Got it.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Can I get if you're interested in sharing, can you please add your name to the agenda? I'll start a little section. I'll add my name there. But it'd be great to have a set of people so that we can distribute the load of just being responsible for the meeting as it's coming up. I would certainly appreciate it.
All right, we have 15 minutes left on the call. Are there any other topics that people want to go back to or to bring up, or are people willing or up for just getting some time back? Brian.
I have an impromptu topic if people want to stay, and we have some time, it looks like. So it came to my attention recently that we are lacking ARM64 builds for like most of the installable bits for Konflux. If you are someone who uses a Mac and Kind and Podman like I do most of the time, it's a barrier to trying to install local Konflux and to do testing and development on it. It usually results in me getting frustrated and then having to go wipe the dust off of my ThinkPad somewhere that I don't remember the password to. And it seems really low effort if most of our teams are using Konflux anyway to build those ARM images. So, question to the group, like, why aren't we building them? Is it just that it wasn't urgent? Are most of the things onboarded so that they could take advantage of multi-arch builds? Is it a thing that we could, reasonably low effort get going?
I think it's probably the case because everything was onboarded before we had multi-arch. which is the same reason for hermetic. We onboarded everything before we had hermetic builds, and so now turning on hermetic builds for all our components is just it's effortful, right? We have to be deliberate about going to do it and upgrading every component. I think same with multi-arch. I can't imagine that there'd be any reason why we wouldn't want to do it, other than it's just, even though it's easy, it's one more thing we need to pay attention to. So we should probably get it done, but I don't know about urgency for it. Whether it's I guess that's another question. Andrew's hand.
I think that there's still some things which might not be onboarded into Konflux. So as they're onboarding, they can definitely do those multi-arch builds. What I assume is one of the most utilized images, which does not have multi-arch support, is that App Studio Utils image that we produce within build definitions. That we have an accepted ADR for creating a common image for using for our runners, which in my perspective would likely replace the App Studio Utils image. And so creating that image to replace it might also help with a lot of it. I don't have visibility into the various images that the controllers use to know whether those are multi-arch or not. But there are at least some of those known gaps for the images used by the tasks.
I mean, I think that I'll give an example of a thing that I think is really bad for, we would have people coming in wanting to help contribute from the community. You need a Red Hat SSO login to log into the stage instance that the UI uses, the UI code base uses by default. And if you don't have one, you need to deploy your own Konflux. And if you're working on a Mac, that's now impossible. You can no longer do it.
Yeah.
Louis?
Can you clarify that? Which the staging instance of the Red Hat registry?
No, the staging instance of Konflux is what the UI is set up to use.
You mean the
Red Hat staging instance. So there's two problems. One is I think we really need to make it possible to deploy this thing locally on an ARM-based system. We also need to probably make the UI code base be using the upstream instance of Konflux, not the Red Hat staging instance.
Yeah. Okay. I understand now. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, I just wanted to know if people were going to get angry if I go around spraying PRs at people to enable ARM builds. Sounds like no, but we still might have some gaps that we have to address, so it's not quite that easy.
I think you should do it, Brian, and you should start a Konflux on ARM SIG and hold meetings for people who are really excited about Konflux on ARM, and then you can celebrate success when you're done.
All right, cool.
Thanks for bringing it up, Brian. Are there any other topics people want to bring up? All right. Well, I'll give you back 12 minutes and we'll see you around next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.